Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brahma Talks. My name is Leora Tech, and I'm the Special Projects Partner of Brahma Grodska Teatr NN, who is sponsoring this webinar. Brahma Grodska is a municipal institution, probably almost all of you know this, a municipal institution in Lublin, Poland, committed to remembering the Jews of Lublin. And Brahma Talks is a webinar series that we hold to talk about all things Jewish Lublin. And today we have a really exciting program entitled Finding Your Family in Lublin Records. And our presenter today is Robin Magid. It's my pleasure to introduce you, Robin. Robin is the acting executive director of JRI Poland, which basically means the head. She lives in California. Her grandmother was born in Lublin. And basically, Robin, to sum it up, is the maven of Jewish Lublin. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Robin. She's going to talk for like 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A, and you can type your questions in the chat as she's talking. If questions come up, please type them in the chat, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So the floor is yours, Robin.
Thank you, Leora. The first thing I'd like to point out is that I put my email address down where my name would be. And please note that my name is Robin with 2 N's because a lot of people or autocorrect misspells it. But you're welcome to write me personally if you don't already. What I'm going to do is share screens, walk through a presentation, and then in the end, if you have questions, I might be able to go out to the internet at that point and show you things live. But for now, I'm going to show you a PowerPoint presentation beginning the way I always begin PowerPoint presentations, no matter who I'm speaking to on genealogy. And that is with this image I took of Lublin. And for me, it's very special because it helps me imagine what it would be like if we could time travel and see Lublin through our ancestors' eyes and to see what Brahma Grodska calls the non-existent city. Of course, the city is there, but this is an image that I treasure. I was able to take this picture because I was at Brahma Grodska on an academic seminar. So I really do thank Brahma Grodska for having me, and a lot of what I've been able to kind of reimagine is due to Brahma Grodska. So thank you, and thanks for asking me to speak today. Leora's right. I'm the kind of go-to person at JRI Poland for Lublin because my dad's mother came from there. And I get to talk about her today. So thank you for that. If you are interested in genealogy and you want to find your family in the Lublin records, then what you do depends on what it is you actually want to know, which is another reason why I like to start with this slide, that it really depends on what you want to know about Lublin. And there's so much to know, as you can tell, even just by the complexity of the Brahma Grodska website. So here I'm on a hillside, and I'm going to show it to you the way I saw it first. The first time I went to Poland and Lublin and to Brahma Grodska in 2001, where I took this picture. This is a model many of you may have probably seen of the city of Lublin, and it was a gift of Lublin's sister city, which Rishon LeZion in Israel. Now, I don't know how this was compiled, but these are actually models on a table at Brahma Grodska, and my guides at the time helped me take this picture because the house I was most interested in was called house number 434. And at that time that I was interested in it, it did not have a street name. Later street names came in. Even later, the house numbers were reordered, and that house actually became Ulica Ruski, house number 8A. And then, so 10 years later, in 2011, I could hone in a little bit better on not just on which house this was. And at the time, we believed it was the yellow house in the 2001 picture. It could have been the gray house. Neither of those pictures actually match what we saw, which is a 3D model Bromogrodska did on a Google Earth overlay that actually no longer works because Google changed. But I was able to see in 2011, 10 years later on the internet, the depiction of what this building, which began as House 434 and my family lived at for at least 100 years that I can document, what it probably looked like. And the side that we're looking at in the middle of that 2011 picture is blank because there was no surviving image of that side of the building. And so it's just sort of fuzzy. So that's kind of how I envision. Now, my grandmother didn't live in these buildings. These buildings were on a different part of town than where my grandmother grew up. My grandmother grew up on Lubartovska Street, but it lets you see kind of what it was like back in the early 1800s when my family did live there. And so I wanted to say, what's really important and what I want you to get out of this is that the internet facilitates so much for us. Bromogrodska helps us weave it together and focuses on the city itself. JRI Poland focuses on the records. The R in JRI stands for records. And Yad Vashem, that I'm going to talk about quite a bit too, really focuses on the individual. And it really takes all of us to weave together to provide a complex but also simple picture of what our ancestors and their communities were like, and in the context of Lublin. So there's an old joke that popped into my head, so I'll tell it. There's a joke about a man who at night is looking for a ring that he lost. His treasure was lost in a park, and another man walks by and says to the first guy, I see you're looking under this lamp. What did I'll help you look. Where do you think you lost your ring? And he points and he says, well, I think I lost it over there, but the light's better over here. And so he's looking in the joke, it's about looking in the wrong place. But I've come to believe that actually, if you transport that joke to today, it actually tells about the brilliance of the internet and how we can look somewhere that might seem like it's the wrong place, but it might actually be the finding aid that we need in order to find it. So to me, the joke is even funnier because it's almost anachronistic once we bring it to the world of computers and how interconnected we are. So I'm going to come back to this other composite picture in the corner at the end of the presentation. But again, he looked under the lamppost because the light was better there, not because he lost the ring there. And I do think that's a valuable lesson for the genealogists today. So I began preparing for this lecture by looking out at the internet, and I ended up with a picture of my favorite spot seen from another view, and that is the view of the city of Lublin promoting this spot. And you can see that they're more interested in the arch. To me, it's like the Arc de Triomphe, but they're more interested in the arch than I am. I'm interested in being transported to another time and place. And so anyway, I just love how it all comes together, and we're interested in the same geographic spots. And that's part of the brilliance, I think, of the Lublin HGIS project that Bromogrodska has, which I'll talk about in a minute. When I Googled Lublin HGIS Bromogrodska, I found a great YouTube video, and I would really recommend it. It's about 4 minutes long, and it's such a great introduction to this project and how you can use it that I'm not going to get into those details, and I can't do it nearly as well as the video did. But again, it's a YouTube video. It seems to have been posted in 2021. So, and what it does is show the integration of all of these projects that a genealogist would be interested in at Bromogrodska, and they're related through the geospatial world, and that was really what I understand was a combination of projects initiated by our dear friend Tadeusz Przejeski, who unfortunately passed, as many of you know, way too soon. And it really breaks our heart, but my heart. But the idea was this idea of integrating people and places and photos and maps and being able to present a unified idea, which really truly is what we're all working towards. So I would recommend that you look at this 4-minute video. You can Google it the way I did, just by remembering HGIS and Bromogrodska, and you'll find it. And then you can go, the email address, the URL at the bottom of the screen is to get to the HGIS main page, and you can explore from there. And there's so much that you can learn from it about your family that you really have to explore on your own. So I went there looking to find my family. And of course, I went back to what my grandmother said, which was that her father owned a cork factory in Lublin at Rynek 5. And so, sorry, she didn't know Rynek 5. She didn't give me an address. I just knew that he owned a cork factory, that it was in his family for several generations. And she would always used to say, "Oy, if I only had the title to that cork factory, we'd be so wealthy." With her accent, we'd be so wealthy. And of course, it was something that was lost in the Shoah, but it was, and she never gave me an address. So I happened to go to Rynek 5 in the HGIS, and I found a lot about the building. I did not find anything about my ancestors' cork factory in that building, but I do want to show you my grandma. So she couldn't tell me it was in Rynek 5, but she told me quite a bit about it, that it employed 25 people, that her father had taught her everything about running that business, that it had 6 pieces of equipment. She explained how cork was processed, and that it was the only cork factory in Poland, which was an important thing at the time because bottles needed to be sealed, and it was generally sealed with cork. So how did I find out it was Rynek 5? Well, there are things called Polish business directories, and JRI Poland actually has 4 of them from the 1920s. They're so expansive that we've only digitized one of them, and it was more than 20 years ago. It needs to be redone. But in the Lublin directory, I was able to look up cork and find that here, in fact, at Rynek 5 was my ancestors' cork factory. And so that's how I can attach it to this political space. The way you can look for things if your ancestors owned businesses in Lublin or wherever is through the JRI Poland website. You can just Google this. I found it faster by just Googling 1929 Polish business directory, and the link to our internal page came right up. There's an area in it in which you can search. It's in blue towards the middle of that screen. So let me orient you a little bit to the JRI Poland website, which is our new website's about 4 years old. It's still in development. I happen to be the head of that project. And the menu bar is across the top of the page. Right after it says JRI Poland on the left, there's a search button. I'm going to show you some searches. And then what I really want to focus on is our Town Explorer. But we do label our projects. That Project Explorer is still being developed. And we have a forum where you can ask questions and crowdsource, I guess is the right term, answers to things on our community forum that we just implemented about a year ago. So this is our website. You have to create a login. Everything here is free, but you have to create a login so that we keep our users safe. There's also a chat widget, it's called, in the bottom right-hand corner, where you can ask a question, I ask that you please do not say, I'm looking for my grandma, she's from Lublin, without doing a search for yourself by yourself first. That this is really meant as technical support, or if you just know that your family came from Poland, but you don't know where, or there's some complicated question to ask. And the reason I can say I instead of we is that I'm also the person who answers these emails. And so this year we implemented artificial intelligence to try to help me out. And we do have a bot that you can ask first. And then if the bot doesn't have the answer, I wrote most of the answers. If the bot doesn't have the answer, then you can ask for a person, and you can end up sending an email to me. So you can imagine that I'm behind, but we do try to be as helpful as we can. In terms of the contents of our database, we have indexed or extracted more than 6.4 million records, and they mention more than 1,900 towns and villages that are either in Poland today or they were within Poland at some point in the past, 1,500 years. So not 1,500 years, that's a little bit too long, but really in about the past 400 years. So today, the towns that are represented in our database are towns that have records surviving in the Polish State Archives primarily. And those towns may be today in Poland, but they might be in Lithuania, Ukraine, Germany, Belarus, Russia, or the former province of Galicia or Empire of Prussia. So we have and there are a couple of towns we've been told from Czech Republic, but we're not sure which those are, so I didn't include it on my slide. What happens if you go into Town Explorer, which I'm doing here, is you can search for a town. So of course I search for Lublin, and I want to point you to the map, which shows with these dots places that we have data for, unless it's in blue, which means there's no surviving data that we're aware of. But we know there were Jews there. Oops, let me go back. So basically in the center of the map says Lublin, even though it's blotted out a little bit. Wieniawa is also hiding in there. And you can see those are in gold. A gold town means it's a town that we have vital records for from the Jewish community. That means that they exist. We may not have indexed them yet, but we have most of the places in Poland that have surviving Jewish records. And if it's the brick color, let's call it, or wine color, then there are places that have records before 1826, but those records are civil records, and so therefore they include Jews, but they were recorded at churches rather than at a synagogue or a civil registry office, because before 1826, only the church, and in some places it's only the Roman Catholic Church. We've also found throughout Lublin area that the Greek Orthodox Church, let me see if I get that right. I think also the Greek Orthodox, but not the Russian Orthodox, I think is the way it went. We've found Jews in the registers in those places. And so we list them for you on the map. So you can see if you don't find your ancestors before 1826 in the Lublin records, it could be that they lived outside of the town city limits, and we think of it as Lublin, but they may actually be from someplace nearby and in those earlier records. So those are all parts of the ways we can get farther back in time than we can through the Jewish registers. If you look on the right side of this page, you'll see that there's a contact for Lublin. The contact is me, and that then we have a source inventory of the different kinds of records that we're aware of that still exist in the archives. You can explore that and scroll down. It's quite a long page. I'm going to show you the next bit below the source inventory. And this is a new feature we just added over the summer that we call JRI Poland Resources, because we've gotten a bit more into maps. And so in finding your family, you may want to know where they are in a cemetery. And we've spent years and years and years creating a catalog of approximately 15,000 burials in the new Lublin Jewish cemetery. That cemetery is new, but it opened in 1829. Brama Grodska, through Monica Tureko, is working on doing more with that, because we actually have grave locations. But remember, all the tombstones, the Matsevot, have generally been stolen from that cemetery. So, during the war. So if you click on this, you can find a map which actually lists the sections of the cemetery. And so I know from the other information that my great-grandfather, the one who owned the cork factory, is buried in section 8. And his wife, who I'm named for, who died in the Lublin ghetto, is buried in section 11. And so the map helps us know somewhat what happened. This map was drawn, it says, in January of 1941. It's before all of the tombstones were destroyed. If you notice in the top left, there's a title, and it's kind of got pink in the background, and that means that I've drawn something and connected it. I'm going to show you, first of all, that if you run over anything, like here, we're running over a men's, one of the men's sections, it points out that the burial, that men and women were buried in sections that were single sex sections. So that kind of helps us understand where people are, and we gives us a way to understand the few surviving photographs a little bit more. If you roll over the title, you can see it's in dark blue in the middle of the screen, the new pop-up screen. You get a new, they call it a modal. You get a new window or pop-up that you can click on to learn more about this cemetery. If you do that, we transport you to another website so that we don't have to reiterate everything about the cemetery again. There is a group, and a survey is called the European Union Jewish Cemeteries Initiative. That initiative took care of the cemetery, and so I don't have to do it, but I can port the user over to that cemetery and learn more. So just kind of delving into a little bit of how we don't do exactly what Brama Grodska does, but we try to give you context for the records that we help you find. Just in general, looking at the kind of records we can deal with, I want to point you to what happens in different time periods. The vital records, as I mentioned, for the Jews of Lublin do not start very early on in the Jewish community of Lublin. They start at a particular point in time. And that point in time for Lublin, because it's in the eastern part of Poland, is 1810. Although my chart here shows 1808 because it's for all of Poland, and the Prussian parts of Poland began recording Jews earlier in 1808. But in Lublin, you're not going to find Jewish vital records recorded at the churches, but as civil registrars until 1810, and they go on until 1825, and then in 1826, Jews are allowed to be civil registrars. They're recorded separately from non-Jews, and then in 1868, the laws change, and all these records have to be kept in Russian Cyrillic, and the Cyrillic alphabet is not Latin based. It does not look like Polish or English, and so it becomes harder for us to read, and we generally have to pay other people to do that for us because we're just Jewish volunteers around the world. Then by 1918, and in some places earlier, and in Lublin it's more like 1915, the records become Polish language again. Jews are still separated, and we begin to see that the rabbis are turning in their books, and we find a lot more Jewish records that are done separate from the civil registrars. There are also some census records. I'll show you some, but in Lublin we haven't found things that late. And then post-war, there are Jews in the records. What we know is that after World War II, there were Lublin court issued death certificates for Shoah victims. And so those records are precious. They often have detailed family trees. It often tells people who survived who may have been in, Mandate Palestine, who made Aliyah and are now trying to take care of property or find out about their families. And so the court records and the death records post-war are extremely important, and some are still protected under the identity theft law that determines how things can become public. So I want to point you to the column on the far left, not the blue one, but the next one that says before 1808, what can you do? Because I know a lot of people who are connected to Bromogrodska say that their families have been in Lublin since the 1700s. I can say that. People say since the 1500s. I believe that for my family, but I can't say that. I have no proof. And therefore, there are things like magistrate records, which are court records, but also other government records. There are notary records, which function like a public notary, which I think we have in most countries, if not all, around the world. So hopefully you know what a notary record is, and census records in those early periods. The challenge in working with these documents is that most of our families did not use surnames. So it's been very difficult, and I'll show you a case of that, to actually move forward and attach the people you find in the records to your family tree. So identifying the time period and verifying the time period records are from becomes very important. And the way I do it is this. I use the JRI Poland database in my mind as mostly a 19th century proof that our ancestors or our relatives were there, although we do have records into the 1920s and sometimes into the 1940s online. So it tells you a little bit about early 20th century. I use Yad Vashem as proof that the family was there during the Holocaust period, so in the 1940s or just prior to the 1940s. And so by doing a search in our database, if you get some hits that there's something there, it may verify for you what time period your family lived in that town. Here I'm looking for my Schulfried family in Lublin, and there's a third way that I'm going to show you briefly. It's going to change on our new system, but it's actually a really helpful thing. And that is that because we have all of these civil records in our database, we can look at it and say, okay, well, how many times are there, how many vital records do we have for a certain family in this town in this time period? And so you can begin to see by watching the progression of the decades how your family moved. Like the surname might pop up in one town, and then you can see that the families moving around Poland. So it's a fascinating study in emigration within Poland. And so that's something that we realized we could add to everyone's experience. In this case, I'm looking for Ziegelman. We get a lot of false positives the way our old system works. And so this is being redone in our new system. In the next year or two, we should have something. So, so these are the three ways. What we're going to do now is a search so that you can see, well, this is how you get to the map. That's what I say. The way you get to the surname distribution mapper is from this screen that I showed you of JRI Poland and Yad Vashem searches, and in the middle, there's a place where you can go to the map for the third way you can verify a time period. So if you want to learn something new, and what you know is that your ancestor's surname was something, in my case, I'm going to use Schulfried because it's a unique name, unlike, Cohen, Kaplan, Greenberg, Friedman, which you're going to find all over Poland. Schulfried is an unusual name that actually also began in Lubartów, but the Schulfrieds moved to Lublin in the 1820s, I think. So with a marriage. But we're going to search in the database for Schulfrieds. And what you'll see if you look at the right is that it tells me by province or gubernia where these names are found. And so the largest number of hits are in the Lublin gubernia. And so I'm going to go there, and we present everything in town form, and then you scroll through it. And again, this is the database we've been using for about 28 years, 27, 28 years. In this case, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you get other types of documentation. Here I'm showing you the 1839 Book of Residents, which is a population census of sorts. We give you a way, if you look on the far right column where it says image, we give you a way to click so that you can actually get to the Polish State Archives scanned images online of the actual page of the register that we created our extracts from. And in this case, I'm showing you my Schulfried family, which appears on the page right here. One of the exciting things about this is that I can compare it to other information I have. And in this case, I happen to know from other documentation that the wife of this family, Ruchel, whose father was David and mother was Leah, that her family name was Ackerberg. And I have a cousin online today from Paris who is related to me through this. These people are my ancestors, and they are also, they're not her ancestors, but they're on her family tree. So we can make connections, but proving it through documents, but often we don't have the surname. These are people born in the 1700s. And so their families didn't generally have surnames at that time. And we have to use other documentation to determine what those surnames are. What I'm hoping to do eventually is create a map like I did this one for a town called Ciechanów, where we found cadastral maps that have the names of who owned the buildings, as well as the map of the parcels in the town. And so what I'd like to be able to do is say, oh, you're searching for a certain record, or in this case, it was a book of residence that was for house, I think it was 839. Let's see house 839 on a map today. And so whether we can port you out to Bramagrodzka's HGIS, or whether we can port you to a map that we ourselves have uploaded, I don't know, but I think that helps bring things together, and that's our goal. So if we're looking for Schulfried, we have a category of things called records from no specified region. In my last search, there actually was one record from that unspecified region. It doesn't mean the people weren't from the region. It means that the source is for all of Poland. And in this case, when I just search on Schulfried without Lublin, and I look at those three records, I can find a document from the American Joint Distribution Committee, which we call the Joint, and everybody calls the Joint. And in this case, it's a World War II document. Again, I can click on this and go to the Joint's archival website. And then if I click again, I can actually see the entries. These are my grandmother's third cousins who perished, according to Yad Vashem, but who in 1940 received aid from the Joint. They were in the Vilna ghetto. So they had left Lublin and gotten as far as the Vilna ghetto. All of these things help us with people today who don't know things. In this case, my friend Marion Weinzweig did not know what her birth date was. She was an infant child survivor of the Shoah. And so one thing I want to point out that I think is relevant to everyone is she had gone both to the Lublin USC archive and to the Opatów archive, where her parents were living in the ghetto approximately when she was born. And she had been searching for her birth record, and the archives could not find it because she said she was Marion Stayman. And so then she contacted me and said, I don't know why they can't find my birth record. I know I was born in the Lublin ghetto because my maternal grandmother was there. Her mother's mother was in the ghetto. Very often children are born not where the parents are living, but where the mother's mother is living because the mother's mother helped with the birth. And so often they're recorded there. And that is something you need to know if you're trying to find your family. So she knew she was born in the Lublin ghetto, but that her parents were really living in the Opatów ghetto, and the cities could not find her birth record. I found her birth record within an hour because I had information from both places. And what I know, and I want you to remember, is that even in the 1940s, but throughout the 20th century, Jews may have been known by a street name, like I'm Robin, but in the Jewish records, even though they're civil records, we are recorded by our Jewish names. So I said to her, we were talking on the phone, I said, well, you said your name's Marion. Are you a Miriam? She said, of course. And I began looking, and what I could see in both towns was that there were very few records. There happened to be 3 in each, very few records for Stayman. But in each case, there were over 100 records for people with the name Steinman, with an N in the middle. And so once we were looking for Miriam Steinman instead of Marion Stayman, we were able to find her record based on the other information she knew. She only knew her mother's nickname. Her dad called her Tsili. We found the mother was Silka. She knew the mother's maiden name. She knew her grandfather's name. She didn't know when she was born, but the Opatów document that the city dug up for her, and there's a picture here of her holding up her successful copy of her birth record they gave her, is that it says in the record she was born in the Lublin ghetto, but her parents didn't live there. So very important to be flexible, to deduce what you can. Similar thing happened with my ancestor. I know him as, or the death record lists him as Herzig Ziegelman, but I think of him as Naftali Hertz. There was a mix-up. I gave the wrong name to my friend Tadeusz, who looked in my JRI Poland database and found something I had never seen before, which led to an amazing discovery, which is another group we partner with called the Foundation for the Documentation of Jewish Cemeteries in Poland, had come out to Lublin and photographed this amazing matseva that we didn't know existed. And so it turned out that Professor Andrzej Chiński had it in his book. There's a beautiful poem. We went out there and got to see this amazing thing. I've now restored the matseva with help of my cousin. And we have this beautiful, highly decorative tribute to our ancestor, who we've now learned a lot about. And you can see this is the old Lublin cemetery. And here he is here in something that was given to me recently by a brick collector in Lublin. Ziegelman, it means brick man. And my ancestor, whose tombstone popped up, was in the brick business. And we know this thanks to Dariusz Proshma. And he sent me in the past year these 2 amazing documents that came out of the Polish State Archives in their city records, the Akta Miasta. And this is a huge collection. And we're all trying to figure out how to find things in it. A lot of our information comes from this particular collection, but I never would have found this without Dariusz. And this shows a list in 1828 of 7 people who are registered as brickmakers in Lublin. There's actually, the list says 6, but there's another name crossed out. So there's 7 people of that list. 5 of those 7 people are on my family tree. And the other 2, maybe I just don't know yet, but my family was very involved in brickmaking in Lublin. And there were logos that were used for them. They're registered. The middle document shows them. And it led us to finding actual bricks with my ancestor's name on them. So this is the top brick is Herzig Ziegelman, or Naftali Hertz Ziegelman's brick. This brick is more than 200 years old. I know that at least 3 of them exist. And the one below is his son, Moshe Aaron Ziegelman, who is my 4th great-grandfather. And so we can actually find tangible information, tangible tangible things, objects. There we go, objects of our ancestors. It's, a miracle that we found this, and I've only been doing this research for 33 years. So it's a miracle that took 33 years in the making, but that came because of the interconnections we have, the brilliance of the internet, the hard work of Brahma-Grodska, and also let's not neglect Yad Vashem. Here is an entry, I'm almost done, an entry for my great-grandmother who I'm named for. As I said, I'm called Robin. My Jewish name is, or my Hebrew name is Rachel. My Jewish name, and the way I think of myself, is Rikl Ruchel, or Rikla Ruchla. My great-grandma who died in the Lublin ghetto. And so I was able to pull this up from Yad Vashem. There's information here about her, some of which I supplied myself, including her actual death certificate, which I went to Lublin and got in May of 2001. This is an actual certified copy of her death record. She died January 30th, 1942, so just before liquidation. And there's a lot of information here, including the house number that she died at. She died at number 37 Lubartovska Street, which was inside the ghetto. She had been moved to that place, and the addresses have changed. And so with Brahma-Grodska's help, I was able to learn that today is labeled Lubartovska 63. And so I have actually been to the building where my great-grandmother, who I'm named for, passed away, and where she was forced to live during the ghetto period. So amazing, amazing things can happen. A lot of that information came from the Rada Żydowska, which is the Judenrat records, which are now online. There are lots of scans, 24,000 scans, and it's a very large collection. But what I'm saying is I didn't direct you directly to what we call the Shukai, to the Polish State Archives website, because it's a little bit hard to search. You can translate some of it into English. The page on the left actually is translated into English, so you can see it's really only the headers. You have to be able to navigate, but now we have Google Translate. And so going back to the old joke about the guy looking for his lost ring under a lamppost, the light's getting better in some of these other places, and partly because we can find the needle in the haystack and help. The man on the left is, I have these are all pictures from America of a person who is still, as of last night, not registered as a Shoah victim or survivor at Yad Vashem. We don't know. But what I do know is that the Rada, the Judenrat records, show that he was called for forced labor as an electrician. Doesn't even mean he was an electrician, but I know that he was alive as of the date that he was called to work. And so that's kind of what we're looking for, is not necessarily the actual treasure itself, but whatever we can find that helps us get there. So with that, I'd like to take your questions. I'll stop sharing, and we'll see what else we can learn about our families from Lublin together.
Thank you so much, Robin. That was really great. We have so far only one question in the chat, which is if your if your family is from a town outside of Lublin proper, such as Markuszów, do you contact the state archives in Lublin?
Okay, so let's look at the first half without the second half, and I'll tell you when it's appropriate to contact the state archives. Okay, and let me make a note, because I'm going to forget one, and you're going to tell me to come back to it. And so I can answer this question in detail. Maybe it'll really help. It's a nice broad question, so thank you. The first thing is, if you're talking about looking for records for any of those 1900 towns or villages or cities around Poland, you should look in the JRI Poland database before you contact any archive, because we're filled with about 170 volunteers around the world who are Jewish genealogists. Well, some of them aren't Jewish. They may be people of Jewish heritage, but they are genealogists studying the Jewish past of Poland. And so, like me, there are, like 169 other people who really understand what's available. So that's the first thing. You can come through the town card, as I showed you, to find out who that right person to ask is. And you can ask them this question. Now, let's say we're talking about Markus Schuv. So in that case, because it's Lublin area, I happen to know something about it. I saw somebody asked a question about Menzrich Podlaski. All of these towns that are in the Lublin area have people assigned who know more about them than I do, because they're studying those towns and I may not be. Now, I may have the overall picture of how far we are on trying to index those things. But there's really 2 points at which you want to contact an archive. One is because the archive has something that's not online. And 2 is because you need to get a certified copy of something. Just a picture from the internet isn't going to be enough. And there are reasons why you might need a certified copy, including that you might be interested in getting a Polish passport. So there can be other reasons. So if it's not, let's say that it's not an official reason, you just want to know information for your own reasons. You're not trying to prove that you're Jewish so that you can go to yeshiva, or prove that you're Jewish so you can be entitled to an Orthodox wedding or something like this. Then so there's other reasons besides Polish citizenship. If that's the case, that you're just searching and you just want to know, start there, because the archives don't have the resources. We don't have the resources to do it for you, but as volunteers, but the archives don't have the resources. And what they'll say is, we'll charge you about $50 an hour to do some search for you. So don't start there. However, the other reason that you want to contact the archive, and for Lublin, and you have to be there in person, is that they may have something that's not online. And so for me, when I go to Lublin, I go to the Lublin archive. There's a workstation there that is the only place where you can see the addresses that people were moved to inside the ghetto. I don't know what they call the collection. I just know that if I want to know something, that's where I have to go. It's a set that we haven't found in the Judenrat records. I don't know where the information came from, but I got family names, not family names. I got biographical information of entire families with young children who were moved from outside the ghetto into the ghetto. So those are the only 2 reasons I would say you need to contact the archive. Oh, directly. But there is, one's the apartment. The other is, if there's a record that is not online, it doesn't mean it's not in the JRI Poland database. We may have paid somebody to go to the archive and scan it, or to sit in the archive and index it, but we may not have the actual scan itself, the image that you want. And if you're only looking for one image and it's at the Polish State Archives, you can write to any of the archives and say, I'm just looking for this one image of my grandma's birth record. And usually they will email it to you for free. So that's the reasons to contact them directly. What else? Anything else people would like to know?
Was there anything else about Menzrich Podlaski that you want to say, or do you feel like you covered it?
Okay, so Menzrich is a really interesting place because a lot of different kinds of documentation have survived, including multiple census records. And we have Max Wald. I don't know if he's on this call. Max Wald in Australia is our town leader, very capable town leader for Menzrich. And we do have other things from the 20s, like boys who were born during a certain time, and so therefore they're going to be old enough to be conscripted for one war or another. All people who moved out of town, all people who came into town during certain time periods. And so Menzrich happens to be a very a place where a lot of things have survived. We have a very rich number of resources, many of which are not online yet. So contacting Max about Menzrich Podlaski is the thing to do.
Okay, great. So then Simon says a great source is Acta Hypoteczne property records. They are in AP, but all the ones for the former Jewish quarter are missing. Any idea what happened to them? Are they kept
No.
under in a
Yeah, go ahead.
court? Such files contain info on owners of houses going back centuries, not sure about tenants.
See, I'm so glad, Simon, that you wrote that question, because I think you know more about this than any of us do. And Tadeusz and I really wanted to sit down with you in person and have a discussion. And I'm hoping, please God, we get to have that discussion soon. So my friend Simon told me once that our ancestors were co-owners in a building around 1824. And that building is a very prominent building. And I don't have proof of it, so I'm afraid to say it out loud in case I was wrong. But I have never known whether that came from real estate records or notary records or something else. And Tadeusz and I always felt that the building department had records and that there were all kinds of things we might be able to find out. And that is an area that I would love to explore. I bet Bromogrodska would love to explore it too. And I think that's where we're headed, to learn really, really ancient information about our relatives who were engaged in business and owned buildings and sold the bricks to the people who were building the buildings, those kinds of things. And so I'm looking forward to exploring that with you.
Great.
I wish I had the answer.
Okay, Dan Oren asks, is there any way to link cemetery plots on the 1941 Lublin, New Jersey cemetery map to exact locations today? And maybe to add to that, I wasn't sure if I understood properly when you were showing that. Is there a way to search for specific names and find out where they were, or not yet?
So we have many pieces of the puzzle. Make sure I tell you the pieces we don't have. What we did have was about a 6-year project done by a team of Israelis, because a lot of the records we found, this was with the help of Director Dimmel, by the way, who I know is retired from the Lublin AP, but it was a joint project of the Lublin archives through Director Dimmel, Bromogrodska with Tadeusz, and me for JRI Poland. And we worked for years and came up with something that we gave to Alex Gurai, who is now in Israel, I believe, who put together a team of 3 or 4 Israelis who could read the Yiddish and the Hebrew and put everything together. And we came up with about 15,000 entries from multiple sets of registers that survived about that new cemetery. What didn't survive, we believe, are the borders and boundaries. We have no idea how big a section actually was. And we didn't know until we found this map. And there's a second one, but this one's nicer than the other. We didn't know until we found these 2 maps in the Acta Miasta that how the cemetery actually looked and where the different sections were, but we don't have a way to do a geolocating thing. We would all love to do that. And I don't know, if we can do it, it's going to have to be with Bromogrodska's help. Maybe the HGIS team can figure out what we can do. In terms of where is something today, what I always wondered from the first time I came to Lublin in 2001 was how, was my ancestors, and that's plural, were my ancestors' graves disturbed by the fact that the communists put a road through the middle of the cemetery? We know that the answer is yes. There are people who are under the highway, the road. We know that everything was disturbed. We know that people walk across it. It's treated like a park, half of it. That the hurts that we have about it, we're going to have to put aside. And I'm quoting my friend Tadeusz, in order to get to the truth. That for Tadeusz, in my understanding of what he was telling me was that we need to work together, and we need to act as friends to address our hurts in a way that we can hear each other, and we can move forward together. And I think if I learned something from Tadeusz, that's what it was, that we understand that non-Jewish Lubliners are not afraid to look at the past, that we as Jewish used to be Lubliners need to understand that particularly Brama Grodska, but Lublin as a whole is reaching out to us, and we need to find sensitive ways to work together to come to an understanding, so that the knowledge can pop up, and we can not be offended and not be angry, and we can all remain friends. So I just feel like I should say that, because Tadeusz really, really taught me that we need to work beyond the hurt. And we're going to find some hurt when we start looking in that cemetery.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So to finish, maybe like a two-part question, but if you can do it pretty
Quickly?
fast.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there one place where you would tell a beginner, this is what you should start with? This is a step to start with, if they're like, whoa, I don't know anything. And then the second thing is, some of us of a certain age are very interested in this, right? And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about the next generation, whether you want to answer that personally about your own children or about JRI Poland. Like, is there an upcoming generation to continue this work?
Thank you. Great ways to end. I would say, and I've already forgotten the first question, so let me address this. Oh, where do you start? I got it. It's kind of this, in a way, it's the same question, because I'd say start with the children. But I think we have to, I learned this from my grandma. Okay. My grandma gave an interview to my cousin Meyer Den, and because he was smart enough to ask, and I wasn't, about what was Shabbat like, and what was Shabbos like in their house in Lublin. And what she said was that after dinner, they sat and told stories about the family. And she meant the ancestors that she had never met. So I would say it's our responsibility to teach the next generation by telling stories as they grow, making sure that we know who we're named for, making sure that we understand why it's important to do something or to remember. And I think the best way to do that, if you want to begin and you don't want to be overwhelmed, is starting with family stories, right? I told you several times, my grandma said this, my grandma said that. That shapes who we are as people. That's how we teach the next generation. But you have to go to the internet now to do something. And so I do think that if you start even just Googling to see what's out there, I've found all kinds of information just by Googling, just by going to JRI Poland. And there are other websites. I'm purposely not naming them because I didn't want to overwhelm you. But if you're looking for the Holocaust area, you're going to look at Yad Vashem. If you're looking at stuff that's place related, you're going to look at Brama Grodska. If you're looking for records about people, you're going to look at JRI Poland. So that's really, I think, where we begin.
That's great. That's an inspiring place to end, I think. And thank you so much, Robin. I think probably those of us who are watching live, but there are also going to be people watching the replay, are going to be as inspired as I am to like delve into some things that I've kind of left, open. So thank you to you. Thank you to Agata, my partner in crime, who's behind the scenes, making sure this all runs smoothly. And of course, thank you to those of you who are watching either live or later. Without you, we would not be able to do this, of course. I wanted to mention that we have an exciting program coming up on February 27th, which is going to be a Brama Meets, about the film A Real Pain, which some of you may know was partially filmed in Lublin. It's a Jesse Eisenberg film, and people have lots of opinions. And when I say Brama Meets, what I mean is it's different than the format we've been using today, which is webinar and you can't see each other and hear each other. And we're going to use the meeting function for that. So people are going to be able to actually talk and have an exchange of ideas. So please look out for that. It'll be posted on the Lubliner Reunion Facebook group. It will be part of the newsletter. If you're not signed up for that, maybe Agata can quickly put the link in the chat, but if not, you can find it on the Brahma website and sign up for the newsletter. So thank you and see you next time.